Okay, we're back for chapter 7. This is called How Parents Can Help. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. Proverbs 23:26. The sun was shining brightly, and the mayflowers were beginning to blossom, but the princess did not seem to notice or to care. She had tears in her eyes, and her thoughts were elsewhere. "What is wrong, my dear, my daughter?" her father asked. "Oh, nothing. I just Oh, if only a knight would come and rescue me in my distress." "Distress? What peril hath befallen thee, my dearest daughter?" "Oh, my father, I be not betrothed. No great knight has sought my hand. Thy daughter becometh an old maid." "And are you not happy?" questioned the king, looking at her intently. "Well, sometimes I am, but until thou learnest to be content in the place God has put you, you will never be happy or fulfilled anywhere. Do not forget, my daughter, that your years have been useful. You have accomplished much. Your bright light has reached to many." "But how long will I have to wait?" The princess sighed and sat down on a bench in the courtyard. "If your heavenly Father told you, then it would not require any faith on your part," the king commented. "You would not learn the lesson or gain the rewards that directly result from waiting." "Yes, I suppose, but I hope my time of waiting is almost over. Oh, father, I have been meaning to ask you something," said the princess, standing up again. "Remember that time we talked about the spring fair? You said it was permissible for me to go, but explained how I must be a candle and a rose." "Yes, I remember. You met Sir Eloquence there," replied the king. Yes," she said, not wanting to be reminded of him. Then she continued with her question. "I was wondering, thinkest thou that I should attend the Merchants' Fest in Carnalville? I realize it is not the manner of event of which we approve." "The Merchants' Fest?" he asked in surprise. "I know thou hast said that it is dangerous and just a foolish party. I know there will be much dancing and evil talk, but I will be careful to stay away from any wicked company. I understand that I do not need to try to search for a husband, but, father, do you not think that I at least need to be meeting more young men? After all, I'm nearly 21. Ah, you do not know what you ask. It is when thy heart is longing so, and thy faith wavering, that thou art in the greatest danger." "But, father, I fear not," the princess declared. "Yea, therefore I fear," her father answered. "Father, you seem to be so worried about everything." "The prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished," recited the king. "The alligator speaks of the festivities and the social banquets to be enjoyed," she continued. "The alligator eats the scum at the bottom of the moat," the king added dryly. "The other maidens will all be going, and I will stay with them," explained the princess as she began to wander slowly through the courtyard. "They mingle oft with the young men in the village. The alligator says that such relationships are healthy." "But thou art forgetting that thou art a princess," said her father, following her. "Remember thou also that the alligator hath dragon's blood in his veins." "But others do not understand that a little foolishness ruins the testimony of one who has wisdom and honor." "But others do not have me as their father. Others do not represent the royal family. But everyone is going to the Merchants' Fest. When you choose to follow the way of purity, did you expect it to be easy? When you decided to wait for the best, did you think that waiting would be fun? Did you think that your faith would not be tested? When you decided to take the narrow path, did no one warn you that difficulties, hardship, and tears would be part of the journey, and that you would often face rejection from others and be forced to walk alone? My daughter, that which you wait for the longest you treasure the most, and through much struggle the prize is won. Her father turned and walked slowly into the palace, leaving the princess to think by herself. The tears were just starting again as she continued her way outside the castle. She leaned against the edge of the bridge and watched a few ducks swim by. As I'm sure you can guess, the silence lasted only a minute, for the tears rolling down her cheeks and into the moat below attracted the attention of her persistent friend, the alligator. "So, you finally are realizing that your plans are failing. Well, it is about time thou comest to thy senses," said the alligator. "I do not wish to talk," she replied, wiping the tears from her cheeks. "Ah, but you do. You want to tell your whole life story to someone who wants to hear every detail, to someone who loves and admires you, to someone who holds you close, well, all right, but I do not want to talk to you." "You need not. Just listen, for I believe that now is the time to reconsider your ways and to allow yourself to grow up. Thou hast no reason to cry. The Merchants' Fest is but 1 week away. My father does not want me to go." "But he never actually said that you could not go. I was listening myself." "Perhaps he would allow it, but he does not want me to. He says it would not be wise." "But, Princess, you are a woman, not a little child. You need not follow every suggestion from thy father." "No, I need not. But up to this point I have always found the counsel of my parents to be valuable. Their caution in the past has not been unwarranted. Should I forsake now that which has guided me for so long?" "Get out of the nest where you are so comfortable and explore the new and the different," the alligator persisted. "You can be careful in Carnalville. That's all your father really meant anyway." "No, it is not all he meant. He meant much, much more." "So, what will you do, silly princess? Stay here and wait for a handsome knight to appear?" "I know not. Please let me be by myself." Do you think that the princess should be listening to her father still, or has she outgrown him? She's 21 now. Do you think that it's wise for her to keep listening to the alligator? He seems to be having more and more influence on her. Well, moving on into our chapter, this section is called A Special Provision from God. In the world in which we live, is it even possible to enter into marriage pure and free from scars? After all, we are surrounded by every kind of temptation and polluting influence, and we have an enemy prowling around like a roaring lion who is doing everything he can to destroy godly marriages. Well, because of these dangers and because this project of finding a life partner is so important, not only for our lives but also for the future generations to come, the Lord has given us some much needed support to help us along the way. He knows that we wouldn't be able to make it on our own, so He has provided some extra special assistance to guide us through, to give us wisdom, to protect us, and to help in any way we need it. This special provision is our parents. Unfortunately, we as human beings seem to be rather skilled at rejecting God's most valuable gifts. A little girl named Julia, who lived on the mission field with her parents, suddenly became ill with a fever. Her mother knew exactly what was wrong, and she had some medicine that would help. She brought this medicine to her daughter, who was lying sick in bed, and insisted that she take it immediately. With disgust, Julia complained that the medicine tasted horrible. She refused to even look at it. Her mother became stern, saying that if she did not take it, she would get seriously ill and could even die. Still, Julia refused. The mother began to plead with her sick daughter to take the medicine. Finally, Julia agreed, that if her mother left the room, she would swallow the disgusting syrup. With a sigh of relief, her mother left, and upon her return, a few minutes later, she was delighted to see that the bottle of precious medicine stood empty. Her mother was confident that Julia would soon recover, but during the night her fever crept very high. All night long her mother sat by her bed, trying to keep the fever down. Finally, in the morning, poor Julia confessed with tears that she had not taken the medicine at all. Instead, she had thrown it out the window. Her disobedience had nearly cost her her life. Just as Julia refused the good gift her mother wanted to give her, so we often reject the good gifts God wants to give us. Most people, in fact, reject His greatest gift of all, eternal life. Imagine being unwilling to accept a gift so unspeakably wonderful. This is exactly the same way we tend to act when it comes to God's provision of parents. Over and over, Proverbs reminds us of the value of listening to our parents' instruction. Parents are a gift from the Lord, yet often we, as Julia, reject the very thing that God intends for our happiness, good, and protection. The young lady who is committed to God's best and desires to establish safeguards in her life will realize the tremendous protection the Lord has given her through her parents. God is the one who has set in place all human authority, and He works through it to accomplish His good purposes in each of our lives. Romans 13:1 and Ephesians 6:2-3. And I like to use this analogy about authority. Authority is like an umbrella. God is the umbrella, and God sets different things in place that are our authorities. Our parents are one, the pastor at our church, um, our bosses they have authority over us in our workplace environment, teachers at school, things like that. Whenever you get outside of the authority, picture yourself coming out from under that umbrella. What happens? You get wet from the rain. But as long as you're under that umbrella, that layer upon layer of authority that God has put in place, you're going to be fine. You will not get wet. So your parents are one of those God-ordained authorities, umbrellas that are in your life. Okay, moving on. Imperfect parents. Some of you who are reading this may not have Christian parents, or may not have parents to guide you at all. So I want to be quick to mention that God will always be faithful to provide the help that you need. Be assured that even though your parents make mistakes, our Heavenly Father never makes mistakes, and He has given you exactly the right parents for you. He will use them for good as He works out His perfect plan in your life. If you do not have parents, remember that the Lord Himself becomes a special Father to those who do not have an earthly one. Psalm 68:5. If your parents are not Christians, understand that the Lord can still work through them. Of course, if they give you counsel that conflicts with clear teaching from God's Word, such as encouraging you to marry an unbeliever, you should obey the Bible, no matter what the consequences might be. But often the Lord will give good direction and protection even through unbelieving authorities. It could be that God is doing two things at once. Maybe it isn't that He gave you unsaved parents, but that He gave them a Christian daughter. He cares for them too, and your obedience is His tool in their lives. We do not know all that God is doing, but if we love Him and apply ourselves to His purposes, He works out all things together for our good. Romans 8:28. When needed, He will also bring you help through other sources, perhaps through your pastor or a godly older couple at your church. It is our responsibility to accept and appreciate the protection and assistance the Lord gives. For most of us, however, this special help we need will be provided through our parents. This doesn't mean that parents make all the decisions, but it is noteworthy to recognize that in biblical times, parents were often involved in choosing their children's mates, and fathers were held responsible for their daughters' purity. You can see that in Genesis chapter 24 and chapter 28, verses 1 through 2, Exodus 34, verse 16, and Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 through 4. The first time I remember discussing the topic of marriage with my mom was when I was very little. I can't recall exactly what she said, but I remember that I had the impression that my dad was going to pick out my husband. That sounded fine to me. In fact, I liked the idea. A few years later, while in class at my Christian school, my teacher explained that parents in Bible times would choose mates for their children. I raised my hand and enthusiastically told the class, in our family, we're going to do that too. Needless to say, my classmates were surprised. One girl asked in disbelief, Sarah, you are actually going to let your dad pick out your husband? Despite the comments from these friends, I wasn't worried at all. I knew that our family was going to be like a team working on this together. I didn't know how the Lord was going to bring my future husband to me, and I still don't know at the writing of this book. I think she's since gotten married, though. But I knew that I could trust the Lord to work through my authorities. Don't panic, anyone. I'm not talking about arranged marriages. Our parents love us and they want what's best for us. My parents would never, ever dream of forcing me to marry someone I didn't want to marry. In the same way, I would never want to marry someone without my parents' input and blessing. You see, if we understand that God works through our parents, then we will realize that parental involvement is not something to be scared of, but rather to be thankful for. I'm sure you would agree that getting married is one of the most important decisions we will ever make, much more important than whether or not we go to college, what interests we may pursue, or where we live. We should be grateful for our parents' protection and willingness to be involved. Our parents know us better than anyone else does, and they desire the very best for our lives. Not only this, but our parents have more experience and understanding than we do. We should take their advice seriously. 7 reasons to send young men to your dad. Whenever I talk to young ladies about this topic, I like to encourage them to make a commitment to direct any young man who expresses interest in them to their dads first. If you make this commitment now and tell your father, it can have many benefits. 1. Your father will respect you and know he can trust you. 2. You and your dad will be a team working on this together. 3. The young man will respect you. Even if he is surprised and finds this to be a completely new concept, he will still respect your conviction. 4. If the young man won't go ask your father, then you know he's not the one for you. It's a good way to screen guys. 5. If you aren't interested in a persistent young man, well, you can let your dad explain that to him. Makes it easier for you. 6. If he does go talk to your father, your dad will probably see things in this young man's life that you do not see. He will be able to give you caution, wisdom, and guidance. 7. If this is the right young man for you, he and your dad will start off the relationship on the right foot. From the beginning, they will respect each other and have good fellowship. This is going to be an important relationship in the years to come. I would say also that making that commitment to have the young man come through your dad first would be another good safeguard, or boundary might be a good word. Dad, Laura exclaimed as she returned home from a Bright Lights meeting, When I get older, you don't have to worry about me and boys because I'm going to send any boys who are interested in me to you." Her dad was a little surprised, especially since he had always imagined that when his girls became teenagers, he'd have jeeps outside his house honking as he watched his daughters run out the door to take off with their boyfriends. This father was, therefore, definitely happy to hear about the decision his 11-year-old daughter had made that evening. He was also a little worried about how he would handle this new responsibility that had been thrust on his shoulders. My friend Laura is 20 now and one of the Bright Lights leaders. Today she says how thankful she is for this decision, which has significantly protected her. You see, Laura's decision when she was 11 was more than just a choice to not date. It was a commitment to stay under her dad's protection and to guard her heart, trusting it with her father until the day when she would get married. It is important at the start of every marriage that the parents of both the bride and the groom give their blessing on it. A very wise commitment to make is that you will not marry someone unless both sets of parents are in favor of it and extend their full blessing. This is a key safeguard that God has put in place. What happens if a young man and a young woman are interested in each other, but one or more of the parents is against the marriage? Well, remember that just because the parents say no now doesn't mean it could never happen later. If it is of God, He can bring it to pass. God is the one who gave these parents to these young people. Maybe the parents can tell it's not the right time yet. Maybe they see that more maturity is needed on the part of one or both of the young people. Nevertheless, the Lord is the one in control, and He is able to work through the authorities He has set in place. Don't keep secrets. "I've been doing some stupid things, Sarah," Crystal acknowledged. "I'd like to talk with you." Crystal was a girl I'd known for about 6 years. She was a sweet friend with a gracious personality and a heart for the Lord. But just like all of us, I knew that Crystal was having some struggles. "Okay, let's talk. It's lunchtime. Want to find a place to eat?" "Sure, sounds good." After talking about all the possible restaurants we passed, we ended up at our favorite bagel shop, the one where I always seem to end up at, but only after an extensive discussion of all the other restaurants in town and an "I don't care, you pick, no, I don't care, you pick" interchange. After getting through the small talk, ordering our lunches, and catching up on news, we finally reached the real subject matter. "Well, Sarah," Crystal began, "Adam has liked me for a while now. At first I insisted that I was not interested in him. I knew he didn't have the character traits I was looking for in a husband, but I still wanted to be friends with him. Since I didn't have very many friends in the area, I soon found myself really appreciating his companionship. My parents warned me to be careful. Years ago, I made the decision to guard my heart and save it for one man. I knew all along that I didn't want to get too attached to Adam, but it's not like I was dating him or anything. We were just friends, that's all. At least, that's all that it was supposed to be. But during the past few months, my relationship with my parents has been really hard, and I feel like they are always critical of me and telling me what to do. This has just caused me to get closer to Adam. As a result, my parents have been giving me more and more cautions in regard to our friendship. They specifically told me that I shouldn't be emailing him. But over the past few months, I've been so lonely, I've started writing back and forth to Adam, text messaging, and talking occasionally on the phone." "And your parents don't know?" Crystal slowly shook her head and answered, "Not everything." "Well, I hate to tell you what you already know," I began. "That's okay," she sighed. "Well, first off, make sure that you can call things what they are," I said slowly. "You mentioned a number of times that you've done some stupid things. I know what you mean, but be careful to call sin, sin. Deceitfulness with parents is not something to take lightly. And as soon as the enemy gets us to compromise in one area, it opens doors for further temptation. Yeah, I know. I need to have a talk with Mom and Dad. Soon, I said, as I nodded and smiled. And as you obey the Lord in this area, He will direct your paths and lead you in other areas as well. I know you feel unsure about what the Lord has ahead for you, but you can't expect Him to direct and increase your ministry if you aren't obedient in what He's already asked you to do. We discussed the whole situation and talked about guarding our hearts, but most of all, I encouraged Crystal that the first thing she needed to do was to confess her disobedience to her parents and tell them the whole story. I appreciated Crystal's humble response and obvious desire to do what was right. I promised to pray for her. About a week later, I received a call. "Crystal, hi, how are you?" "Oh, I'm so much more encouraged than I've been for a long time," she answered enthusiastically. "Sarah, well, I had that talk I needed to have with my parents. Sunday afternoon, I asked them if we had time for a serious talk. I wasn't sure whether to hope that they'd say yes or no, but they told me it would be a good time. It was hard, Sarah. It was really hard. I confessed everything, and we talked for several hours. I wished I could just type a letter to them because it's easier to type than talk when you're holding back tears at the same time. But I knew that in person would be better. And you know, if you had told me a week ago that if I had this miserable talk with my parents, I'd feel great and everything would be lots better, I would never have believed you. But it's true. This week, things have improved so much. My relationship with my parents is less strained, and they have been talking with Adam and giving me clear direction regarding our relationship. Adam's growing spiritually. I'm growing spiritually. I feel such a freedom, and I'm just so encouraged. Embrace the safeguard. One of the most important commitments I ever made was that I would not keep any secrets from my parents. If there are any areas in your life that your parents do not know about, particularly any little areas of deceitfulness, then I'd encourage you to follow Crystal's example and tell them everything. Yes, everything. I understand how difficult it is to humble yourself, especially if you feel that your parents have always been wrong or have also been wrong. But remember, the Lord exalts those who humble themselves. It's a promise. See James 4:10. So take the most humble road possible. Have a talk with your parents. Don't bring up any of your claims against them. Don't defend yourself. Just take the blame and ask forgiveness. You will find the same rewards that Crystal found. A second lesson to learn from Crystal's story is the importance of listening to the advice of your parents. Many times my parents have recognized cautions that I have not discerned. It takes faith to listen to your parents' wisdom when you don't understand. It's hard. It's tempting to just rationalize that you know better in this situation. It's difficult to submit, but time after time, I have seen how God has used my parents for good. I have seen the Lord richly bless those young ladies I know who have chosen to honor their fathers. Ephesians 5 commands husbands to love their wives, and wives to respect their husbands. As women desire to be loved, so men desire to be respected. In order to be prepared to respect and submit to a future husband, it is crucial that we learn how to honor our fathers. Ask the Lord to strengthen your relationship with your dad and to give you ideas about how you can honor him in your life, in your daily life. Also would like to add that when we are not submitting to parents, we actually are not submitting to the Lord. So that's kind of like the first step in the lessons of submission. As you submit to your parents, you're submitting to the Lord. Then later, as you submit to your husband, you're submitting to the Lord. My friend Olivia recently shared with me that the Lord has been challenging her to look for little ways to honor and bless her father each day. One afternoon a few weeks ago, she was planning to throw together a quick supper for her dad, and then spend the rest of the day doing what she wanted to do. But then the Lord reminded her of the choice she had made to strive to serve and respect her father in the little things. Instead of making the quick supper that she knew was not her dad's favorite meal, she decided to ask him what he would especially like her to make. She chose to forfeit her time and schedule in order to do something special for him. It takes effort to serve, submit, and to communicate with your Father, but God promises blessings for those who do. In addition, it will be very meaningful to your dad and important preparation for your future marriage. Speak well of your father to others. Pray for him every day. Ask him to give you direction in ministry. Express gratefulness for the things he does for you. This attitude of honor is greatly pleasing in God's sight. You can see that in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 4 through 6. One evening, while teaching a Bright Lights meeting on the topic of polluting influences, I challenged the girls in my group to make a commitment to listen to their father's words of protection. I gave them a certificate to sign and then take home for their father to sign also. The certificate says this: "This certifies that I have made it a goal to stay under my father's protection. Thank you for praying for God's protection over me. Thank you also for protecting me from polluting influences, evil, material, worldly thinking, wrong friends, and anything that causes wrong thoughts, words, and actions. I will strive to follow your guidance regarding these influences and keep myself from being polluted by the world." Daughter's signature, father's signature. All right, going on with our story. One girl enthusiastically showed her father this certificate, asked him to sign it, and put it in her Bright Lights notebook. Several years later, as this young lady was excitedly talking about an activity she was looking forward to, her father interrupted her and said, "I don't want you to be involved in that activity." "But Dad," she complained, "this is something I really want to do." "I'm sorry," her dad explained, "but I think this particular activity is going to hinder your spiritual walk, produce wrong thoughts, and distract you from the Lord." "Dad," she persisted, "I won't let it affect me in that way. There's nothing wrong with it, and besides, many of my strong Christian friends are doing it." Finally, her dad responded, "Do you remember several years ago when you asked me to sign a certificate to protect you from polluting influences? Well, I am trying to fulfill my responsibility of protecting you." She listened to her father, and even though she was very disappointed, she decided not to participate in this particular activity. Now, several years later, this young lady has told me how grateful she is for her father's protection in this area. She agrees that this activity would not have been wise, and looking back, she is able to clearly see that the Lord worked through her father for good. He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, Proverbs 10:17. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother, Proverbs 6:20. Obstacles to parental involvement. I hope you're beginning to see that parental involvement is a good thing, something to be grateful for, and a valuable gift from God. Of course, it is not always easy to humbly receive it. The enemy will work hard to keep us from the blessings found in working together with our parents, just like that alligator was doing with our princess. Here are two difficult obstacles he places in our way. One is damaged relationships. Satan seeks to destroy our relationship with our parents by stirring up bitterness, anger, and rebellion. Obviously, this will be a huge hindrance to the strong, healthy, working relationship that is needed in order for parents and children to be able to freely discuss important topics like marriage. That is why it's essential to clear up any past offenses and to work on being close to our parents now. Number 2, cultural influence. The world is working against us. The world is telling us to do things the opposite of the biblical way, to be independent from our parents and to make our own decisions. Therefore, we must realize that this is just another area in which we as Christians need to be willing to stand alone by following God's ways and honoring our parents. Benefits to parental involvement. Number 1, wisdom and caution from someone older and wiser who loves you and has your very best interest in mind. 2, valuable insight in evaluating a young man's character. 3, help in protecting emotions. 4, caution when you're headed in a wrong direction or not aware of danger. 5, accountability. 6, help in discerning the right steps and the right timing. 7, freedom that comes from knowing that God will work through earthly authorities. A godly 25-year-old man fell in love with a young lady named Maria, who was 20 years old. They were both mature Christians, committed to using their lives for the Lord's work. In fact, both were already missionaries, and they met on the mission field. It seemed like a perfect match, except for one problem. Maria's parents had died many years earlier, and she had been working with an elderly lady who was a fellow missionary. Surprisingly, this lady was completely opposed to their marriage and began to spread false rumors about the young man. She would not allow him to have any contact with Maria. The two young people were heartbroken and grieved and wondered what they should do. Believing that God would work through the authorities set in place, this young man wrote a letter to Maria's uncle, her legal guardian, to request her hand in marriage. Seemed like an impossible situation. The elderly lady also wrote letters to the uncle and other relatives, trying to discredit the young man's reputation. The uncle had never even met the young man. Surely he would believe the lies. Why would he not, right? But the young people trusted that the Lord would work through authorities. 4 long and difficult months went by as they waited for a response from the uncle. At last a letter arrived. Maria's uncle had researched the situation himself, and to their utter joy and amazement, he had granted permission for the marriage. This young man was Hudson Taylor, a well-known missionary to China. He and Maria Dyer were blessed with a very happy marriage. Later he wrote, "I have never known disobedience to be the definite command of a parent, even if that parent were mistaken, that was not followed by retribution. Conquered through the Lord, He can open any door." Shortly after their marriage, Hudson Taylor said, "Oh, to be married to the one you do love, and love most tenderly and devotedly. That is bliss beyond the power of words to express or imagination conceive. There is no disappointment there, and every day as it shows more of the mind of your beloved, when you have such a treasure as mine, makes you only more proud, more happy, more humbly thankful to the giver of all good for his best of earthly gifts." Their story is a beautiful example of how God desires to bless those who honor their authorities and trust in His timing. It does sound like God worked a miracle in that situation, but we should be encouraged to know that God can do that, and He's not hindered by anything. The suggested memory verse is Proverbs 23:26. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. Suggested assignment. In Chapter 1, we discussed how a true princess does not simply tolerate safeguards, she embraces them. One way to demonstrate your desire to embrace your parents' protection would be to make your own certificate similar to the one mentioned in this chapter. Sign it and present it to your father and or your mother, and ask him to sign it as well. Keep it in a place where it will be a reminder to both of you of your commitment. The Great Toboggan Ride. Testimony by my sister Grace. Come on, you guys, I called to my friends at the top of the sledding hill. If we get a lot of people on this toboggan, it will go really fast. It was the first big snowfall of the year. The hill was packed. I had arranged for a group from our church to go sledding together, and I was delighted when I saw that one of my friends had brought a toboggan. This is going to be fun, I thought, as I took the front seat and 4 of my friends piled on behind me. As we were about ready for the push-off, my dad approached the scene. Wait, you can't go down on that, he said. That's really dangerous. Oh, great. Why does Dad always have to get involved and spoil the fun? I thought. Feeling slightly embarrassed by his cautiousness, I told Dad that we would be fine. No, he insisted. Look down there. There are tons of little kids. You could hit any one of them. It could be a serious accident. Oh, brother, everyone knows that sledding involves a little risk, but it always turns out fine, I thought. This toboggan is like a killer machine going down the mountain, Dad continued. Someone could die. Dad, I explained, this is what sledding is. People know to move out of the way. That's false. It will be going too fast. The hill is crowded. I don't think you should go down. By now, the whole church party was listening and wondering what would happen. My friends on the toboggan all thought it would be fine. Sarah thought it was fine. I thought it was fine. Even the other adults didn't seem very worried, so finally my dad reluctantly backed off, and we started down the hill. We'll just yell really loud so people will get out of our way, we told my dad. Down we went. We got going faster and faster, and it was really fun until we hit a little 6-year-old girl. She went flying and did a complete flip over the top of the toboggan. We came to a stop, jumped off, and ran back to the girl, who was now standing up and in her dad's arms. Is she okay? My friend asked. Well, what do you think? Her dad snapped back. It was obvious that he was very upset. Why did this have to happen the one time my dad cautioned us not to go? I wondered. It turned out that the little girl seemed fine, just shook up. Then a disturbing thought came to me. Dad is at the top of the hill and saw all of this happen. Yes, Dad had endured several seconds of sheer horror from the top of the hill as he watched the little girl fly through the air. I returned to him right away, feeling repentant and concerned, and we discussed what to do. We looked for the little girl and her family, but they had already left. The sledding party had suddenly become much more sober. All the other people from my church had watched me disregard my dad's caution and then end up in this trouble. We all learned a lesson. I asked my dad to forgive me, and I was very grateful to the Lord that it didn't turn out worse. A few weeks later, on Christmas morning, I noticed that there was a gift from Dad standing up behind the tree. I smiled when I saw that it was a sparkly red miniature toboggan. Next to it, there was a poem entitled The Great Toboggan Ride. The poem explained how in life there are a lot of different toboggans, things that seem fun for a while but then lead to trouble. A toboggan ride could be a relationship with a boyfriend, the immoral atmosphere of a secular college or high school, or participation with friends who pull you in a wrong direction. It could also be reading romance novels, watching television and movies, listening to rock music, telling lies, or being careless in our internet activity. Satan, who knows our weaknesses, will use different temptations in each of our lives. Toboggans always go in one direction, down. It's a slippery slope. We get going faster and faster, and it's hard to stop. Toboggans are difficult to control. We may hop on because our friends are all doing it, but soon we see that we're going to crash. Even if we jump off mid-flight, it's a climb to get back to where we were. It seems so easy just to get on a toboggan and slide down, and so hard to climb upward to God's best. But the small amount of fun that we may have going down on the toboggan doesn't even compare to the peace, the joy, and the reward that God gives when we follow His way and climb to earn the prize. We need to be going up, not down. And I can personally attest to the joy and the peace that comes when you obey God. There is nothing in this world like it. I would encourage obedience to God in every circumstance. Okay, that closes out chapter 7. We'll be back for chapter 8.